Welcome to the Theology Made podcast. I'm Jordan. In today's episode, we're going to look at the man who gave everything away and thought he was finally free. You're in a public square in medieval Italy. It's loud and crowded. There are merchants, clergy, townspeople, the kind of midday crowd that stops when a spectacle is going on. And standing in the middle of it, a young man is taking off his clothes. Is he mad? Not quite. Is he protesting? Nope. He takes them off and hands them back to the man standing across from him, his father. Then the young man walks away. No money, no name, no plan. And by every account we have, he's smiling. To understand what just happened, you have to go back about 2 years. The young man's name is Francisco. His father, Pietro Bonadone, is one of the wealthiest merchants in Assisi, a prosperous hill town in central Italy, the kind of place where reputation and social standing is built tactfully, politically, and carefully over generations. Pietro had worked hard for what he had. He built a business, secured a future, and Francisco was supposed to inherit it. And by all early accounts, Francisco was good at being rich, charming, generous with money, the kind of young man who threw parties and picked up the tab. He wore the best fabric in town, his father's fabric, naturally, and moved through social circles with the ease of someone who had never seriously considered what life looked like without them. Then somewhere along 1202, he went to war. Assisi and the neighboring city of Perugia had one of those territorial disputes that medieval Italian cities specialized in. And Francisco was young, ambitious, probably imagining some version of himself returning as a hero right out the fight. But there was a problem. He was captured. He was held prisoner for about a year. He came home sick, physically diminished, and something else. People who knew him said he was different after that, like a man who had looked at something he couldn't quite unsee. And then he started doing strange things. He would ride out into the countryside and find himself face to face with lepers. People who lived on the absolute margins of medieval society, who were feared and avoided not just out of cruelty, but out of a genuine terror, since leprosy was incurable, disfiguring, and not fully understood. What if I caught it? And the social code around them was absolute. You don't approach, you don't touch. Francisco dismounted and embraced lepers. He later describes it as a moment everything shifted. He said that what had once seemed bitter to him, the encounter, the proximity to suffering, the giving up of distance, suddenly became sweet. And that's the word he used, sweet. And at first that sounds like the language of mystical experience. It's super abstract. It's like reading T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. What is he even talking about? But what he's saying wasn't meant to be abstract. He was describing something concrete. That the thing he had been trained his whole life to avoid, the thing that violated every social instinct he inherited, turned out to feel more real and more alive than anything the comfortable life had offered him. He's not talking about suffering for its own sake. He's talking about really seeing people, about what happens when you stop managing your distance from the world and enter into it. And so he started giving things away. His father's things at first, which from Pietro's perspective was theft, regardless of the intention behind it. And there were confrontations, there were arguments. Now, Pietro was not a villain. He was a father watching his son dismantle everything he spent his life building, and he couldn't find a framework for understanding it except loss, which is, in a way, what it was. Just not the kind he was familiar with. The confrontations, eventually they went public. Pietro, frustrated and legally within his rights, brought the matter before the Bishop of Assisi. It was a formal hearing to settle the question of Francisco's obligation to his family and to the business. And it was there, in front of the bishop and whoever else had gathered to watch, that Francisco did what he did. He handed back the clothes, all of it, returned to his father every material thing that connected him to that life. From now on, he said, I will say only our Father who art in heaven, not Father Pietro Bonadone. The bishop, who was moved, wrapped his own cloak around the young man. But when Francisco walked out of the square, he didn't lose everything. He let it go. And those aren't the same thing. Loss is something that happens to you. It leaves a wound, an absence, a grief. Letting go is a different motion entirely. What Francisco experienced in that square and the years that followed was not the sorrow of a man who lost it all, but a lightness that comes when you've unburdened yourself from the wants the world offers. He spent the next several years in and around Assisi, living on pretty much nothing, begging for food, repairing crumbling old churches with his own hands. People thought he was mad. His old friends pitied him or laughed, probably a little bit of both. His father, and this is genuinely heartbreaking, apparently crossed to the other side of the street to avoid passing him. But then people started following him. The early Franciscan movement is one of these stranger sociological phenomena in church history. The problem today is that it gets retold as a Disney tale. It gets reduced to St. Francis loved animals, and the famous prayer attributed to him that he never said. And because of that, we miss out on the real disruption. Within a few years of that square in Assisi, there were dozens of men living by Francis's rule, which was essentially no rule at all, in the conventional sense at least. No property, no acclamation, work with your hands, beg what you can't earn, give away whatever exceeds today's need. Move freely, belong to nothing. The medieval church was institutionally one of the wealthiest entities in Europe. It owned land, collected taxes, ran political machinery, and the gap between the church's material reality and the teachings of the man it claimed to follow had become, by the 13th century, something even loyal churchmen acknowledged. And into that gap walked Francis. Now, he didn't write a treatise. He didn't post demands on a cathedral door. He just lived a certain way, and people found out about it. And it was so dissident with everything around it that even if they wanted to try, they couldn't look away. And what looked like sacrifice to others felt like freedom to him. And then others watched him, and they began to wonder, am I the one that is really trapped? There's a word that comes up repeatedly in early accounts of Francis, and it's translated joy. It's an active, almost unreasonable kind. He sang, he called the sun his brother and the moon his sister, spoke about them with a warmth that his contemporaries found either beautiful or just unhinged, depending on who you ask. And he wrote what we now call the Canticle of the Creatures, one of the earliest poems written in the Italian vernacular, predating even Dante. And it reads like a man who found everything lovable once he stopped trying to own any of it. The wind, the water, the fire, even death, which he called Sister Death, is welcomed in the poem without dread. That's a strange emotional register for a man who owns nothing, sleeps rough, and has no security of any kind. Now, to be clear, the argument embedded in his life is not that poverty is inherently virtuous, or that comfort is necessarily evil. It's that attachment, the psychological grip of needing things to stay a certain way, the anxiety of protecting what you have, the constant management of appearances and statuses and security is what holds you prisoner. Now, we're not medieval peasants, but we're not that different. We have built entire industries around the management of anxiety about the future. Financial planning, insurance, status signaling, the acclamation of options and exits and backup plans. None of that is wrong inherently, but somewhere inside is the voice of Pietro Bonadone. Work hard, secure your position, protect what you have, and when you've done all that, you can rest. There's a problem with that equation. The work is never quite done. The position never feels secure enough. The money is never enough. And the thing you've protected keeps growing more complex, which means the anxiety actually grows with it. Francis looked at that. He had watched it operate in his father, felt it operating in himself, and decided it was a bad deal. The ROI wasn't what it promised. And what he found in its place was not nothing. He found a freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances staying favorable, a joy that doesn't require protection. He died in 1226, at around 44 years old, in the very town he grew up in. He asked to be laid on the bare ground at the end. Not a bed, not a cot, just earth. And the movement he started would grow into the Franciscan order, which exists to this day and has shaped everything from theology, education, missionary work. Even the previous occupant of the papal chair took the name Francis specifically as a signal of something. But all the institution, that came later. What Francis himself left behind was not an organization. It was a question posed by the shape of his life. The question isn't why he gave it all up. The question for him is why, when most people sense, in some quiet, recurring moment, that the thing they're building isn't quite giving them what they expected, why do they keep building anyway? Francis of Assisi was not a mystic hiding from the world. He was directly in it, into the leper colonies, the broken down churches, the embarrassment, the poverty, and oh yeah, the beautiful open sky. The freedom he found wasn't on the other side of having enough. It was on the other side of not needing to. Hey, I'm Jordan. It's been Theology Made. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who's still figuring out what they're building towards.